Issues and Insiders. My name is David Bass. I'm education reporter with Carolina Journal. We're coming to you from the State Policy Network annual convention in Chicago. We've gotten a chance to sit down with a number of interesting individuals and interview them on various topics. This particular interview is with a gentleman named Doug Turpin, who is the founder of the Coalition for Liberty. And Doug has an interesting story of an experience with his own family at a school in Charlotte, and how that inspired him to found this organization that's really built around empowering parents to know what's truly going on in schools and empowering them to make good decisions about where they send their children. Doug, thank you for joining us today on Issues and Insiders to talk about your experience at the Charlotte Academy. I'd love just to hear kind of what happened at Charlotte Latin with your family. Could you just basically tell us the story kind of from beginning to where things are right now? Just kind of introduce us to that story.
So it was this particular event that kind of inspired me to start the Coalition for Liberty. And so I grew up in Charlotte, and Charlotte Latin was always an apolitical classical education school that measured children on merit and taught them according to Judeo-Christian values. And they fulfilled their agreement with us when we started out. Politics was one of the things that they always told us that was not allowed in the school. You should never know what political leanings the teachers had. And until they had a new headmaster, Chuck Baldecki, come in, that was the way it always was. But after the George Floyd riots, all of a sudden they started sending out all kinds of very puzzling emails that sounded like virtue signaling. And then strange things began to appear in the school that were rather alarming to Christian parents like us, such as this is a picture of Jesus. His throat is cut, black blood is going down his shirt, and you might not be able to see it, but on his forehead the words "God is dead" is on there. And they said, well, a child drew that. I'm sure the child wasn't inspired by any of the teachers there to go ahead and do something like that.
And this was in the hallway?
This was in the hallway.
In the hallway of the school.
It was considered worthy artwork. And so that was alarming to us. They took away the invocation. They had a book called This Is Gay in the library, which was a cartoon gay sex manual, which I didn't really see the educational content in there. You know, we don't want the Kama Sutra in the children's library. We don't really need a how-to cartoon manual. And we kept seeing one thing after another. When we would ask questions of the school, they said nothing's changed. And we're like, but it's obvious things are changing. Could you please just explain to us what it is you intend to do? You're always talking about transparency, that's in our contract. We're supposed to have conversations when we have concerns, but you keep telling us nothing's different. So after we started hearing from the administration that some of the parents in our group, there was over 60 families that had concerns, they were starting to say things like, well, maybe this isn't the right school for you, but still never explaining to us what was going on. So we went to the board. The board promised us they'd allow no retaliation against us. So we went in and gave them a presentation at their request. And we started showing them all these things. And they essentially said, thank you for sharing. At the end of it, we're not going to explain anything that we're doing. And if you have any further questions or concerns, please take it to Chuck Baldecki and the administration. Almost immediately after this, my son started being harassed by one of the teachers that was also the head of the DEI faculty there. And she was telling him that not only were all Republicans were white supremacists, and you knew this was true because Joe Biden said so, they don't want black people to be allowed to vote. And these are the things I'm hearing at story time. He's telling me that his teacher won't allow him to go to the bathroom and won't allow him to pull his mask down to drink water. And I was very alarmed at that. So I followed school policy. I sent an email to the middle school principal after confirming with the staff that these were not allowed in the school's overall policy. And he refused to have a conversation with me. He said he was going to go straight to the teacher instead of actually having a conversation to hear what my concerns were. And I was super alarmed because he was already being harassed. And he said, well, I guarantee you there'll be no blowback and no retaliation in an email. And he said he was going to do a thorough investigation. It was going to take 2 days. But he still wouldn't talk to me. So I got an email back from him an hour later, copying the headmaster. And they said they wanted to talk to me privately. They'd finished their thorough investigation. I was suspicious, so I went to my in-house general counsel at my business, and he said, Doug, this doesn't sound good. I would record this. You're allowed to go ahead and record this conversation. I walked into the meeting, and they said essentially that my son was a liar. They knew he was a liar because they asked the teacher. And because I didn't trust the teacher and I didn't trust the administration, and I'd been plotting against them, I'd actually been meeting with other parents, talking to them about the things that they were doing, which I never imagined that was a crime. So they immediately expelled my 2 children from the school. They wanted to send a message to everybody that if you keep asking questions, you're next. That was such a shock. And so we were out of school for weeks because we discovered that there's a shortage of high quality private school education. They're all full up. There's huge waiting lists. That was part of the discovery process that we went in. And 2 days after our children were expelled, the board sent out an email describing all of the parents that were in our movement as essentially as racist. And so we filed a lawsuit against the board for defamation and against the school for breach of contract, unfair and deceptive trade practices. You can't lie to a parent, tell him that you're going in there to talk about the concerns about his welfare and how a teacher's treating him, and then expel their children just for asking questions. That was exactly the process in the school. So we created a website. It's called honorabovall.org. It chronicles our family's journey, all the things that happen, all the communications, all the presentation that we created for the board at their request that they described as essentially racist. So that website went viral. And I started having people all across the country, hundreds of them, contacting me, telling me similar stories about terrible things that were going on in their schools, in their lives. People were being falsely accused of being racist and bigots and white supremacists and homophobes, and they were losing their jobs. And it was heartbreaking to hear how much of this kind of thing was going on, and that other people were being threatened, intimidated, or expelled from schools simply for asking questions about what was going on. So we knew we weren't alone, and I knew it was a nationwide problem. So I founded the Coalition for Liberty because I don't think cancel culture is going to stop until somebody actually starts holding people accountable for their actions. There's a lot of great organizations like Alliance for Defending Freedom or Pacific Legal that's here at the State Policy Network, and they defend people, but nobody's going on offense. Nobody is filing lawsuits against the people personally that are making knowingly false accusations just to try to destroy somebody. The average everyday person's just not able to defend themselves. So we're raising money to be able to stop this kind of thing. And then we're helping people form new apolitical classical education schools, both charter schools and private schools. Because once a school has gone in this direction, if there's a liberal board that appoints new board members, they're not going to have a conversation or a dialogue with you. In general, they're just going to respond kind of like Charlotte Latin did there, with threats and intimidation or expulsion as a means of suppressing people's right to have free speech and have dialogue. So we're also helping grassroots organizations, people like the Moms for Liberty or other organizations that are trying to speak up for children and saying, well, you know, they're kids, they're kindergartner through 3rd grade. They don't really need these kinds of highly sexualized material being presented to them. Let them just be children. So those are some of the kind of things Coalition for Liberty is doing. We're also forming a new school backing one in Weddington, North Carolina, called Liberty Classical Academy. So we've got under contract 62 acres of property, and we're going through the zoning, entitlement, and sewer process. Hope to open up in 2026. And our goal is that we can provide people choices. If that's the kind of education that they want, then great. I applaud their right to go ahead and have that kind of education. But I kind of considered education fraud to start out in telling parents that you're an apolitical classical education school, measuring children on merit and teaching them Judeo-Christian values, and then suddenly flip to a totally different type of school and then lie about it and say, that's not us, we're not doing anything different. So we'd like to help parents to form new schools and then make sure they stay that way. We've got a governance process where we're showing schools that they can create a statement of values and put it in their bylaws, and then have every board member sign this statement saying they affirm and support the school and will abide by this statement of values. And then they'll put that in the enrollment agreements and in the teachers' contracts so that the school will be able to stay on track to what it originally promised. The founders of Charlotte Latin would have never dreamed that their school would have been transformed and changed in this manner. So now that it's apparent that this kind of thing can happen, we can go to schools and show them how they can stay on track to what they originally wanted to be.
You mentioned something interesting about the supply of private schools and how many individuals are on the wait list, even in the Charlotte area. So part of what you're trying to do too, is expand the number of private schools that are available.
Right. Charter and private.
Charter and private, and also those that truly respect the values of the parents who are attending, and there's not a bait and switch with things.
Right. And that actually is a deterrent, because right now they can be extremely arrogant with the way that they're behaving, because they just basically tell people, hey, I've got lots of people that want to come in to this school. There's a large wait list. If you decide you're not happy, maybe this isn't for you, then we've got lots of people to replace you. But if we start forming new schools that parents that's not the indoctrination that they want their children to have. They want an education-focused school that's apolitical, that doesn't lean left or right, that just focus on educating. Then we can start these schools and give people a home, a place where they can go. There's also a lot of kindergarten through fifth grade schools that there's not a place for their children to go afterwards. There isn't a availability in middle school or in high school for you to switch out. So when all this happened to us, it came crashing down that this was a nationwide problem. It wasn't just in Charlotte that there was waiting lists of 6, 7 deep. This was a phenomenon all across the country. So we have embarked on this mission to go to the parents of these schools and saying, we can help you. We've got investment banking firms that will help build the new schools, provide the funding, sell tax-free bonds. We've got an ability to help them with fundraising, grant writing. There is a lot of education-focused organizations that will help provide seed capital for these guys. And then we can help them with the bylaws and the creation to show them this school can stay true to what you originally want it to be.
Interesting, yeah. So speaking directly to parents out there, what would you say are some of the top ways they could stay engaged and informed about what's going on at their school, even a private school? Because obviously by your example, the woke culture is influencing things everywhere.
Yeah.
So really nowhere is safe. So it's important that parents stay aware. So what are some top ways they could do that?
Well, they can ask questions of the administrators, but in my experience, if the school is leaning far left, they are going to react in a very hostile manner to these kinds of things. And even in some of the charter schools, they have liberal boards, and so they are acting in ways that are very threatening to the parents. So we're working with the legislature to enact changes and reforms. In North Carolina, it's recently passed a Parents' School of Rights, Parents' Bill of Rights. And so we're working to amend those kind of things so that the parents can be free of intimidation and harassment. And the legislature is very, very interested in these kind of things because they see what's happening. They're seeing how schools are doing this. The National Association for Independent Schools and the Southern Association for Independent Schools actually filed a amicus brief in support of Charlotte Latin, even with this incredibly egregious set of facts where they lure you into a meeting under false pretenses with no retaliation and expel your children in blatant violation of the contract.
Yeah.
And we have them on video where they're explaining to parents, explaining to the schools, an attorney for the SAIS, that you might want to be able to expel children if parents are asking troublesome questions. Why? It might also be you don't like where the parents work. You might not like where their relatives work. You might not like what the relatives say. It could be on social media. You might even find that grandma is causing problems in the carpool line. And you might need to be able to expel the children because you just don't like it. Now, you may have a conversation and explain to them how they need to act first, but you need to be able to expel them for this. It's horrifying that these kinds of things, that they are so focused on indoctrinating children and turning them into culture warriors, that they would have the schools change the contract in oppressive ways. Anyway, we filed a response to that amicus brief that people can read. We've got a case before the Court of Appeals, and our goal in this lawsuit against Latin is to send a message to the schools out there that this could have repercussions. Don't do this to other parents. We're fighting on behalf of all parents, the ones that can't afford something like this. We want to deter this. Yeah. We're prepared to go to the Supreme Court if necessary.
So Coalition for Liberty is about a year old.
Yes.
So relatively new endeavor. In the coming years, to be successful, what would you say are the top 2 or 3, 4 things that you want to accomplish?
We need to raise a lot of money. In order to fight back against cancel culture, to provide all these services, I've donated. The Dixon Foundation in Charlotte gave us $500,000. It's a former Harris Teeter family, and so we're out there talking here to foundations, to wealthy individuals, and just everyday Americans, and saying, support us so I can go out there and support getting new schools established, helping people take back their school boards. We want to help kids in the public school arena, so we're partnering with particularly in the African American community, with their faith community. They are, in Charlotte, 8% of third graders can read at grade level. It's just a shocking dereliction of duty. So we're trying to support reform efforts there to change the outcomes for the children in the public schools and help people form new schools to act as a deterrent. So we need funding to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's exciting right now in North Carolina too, because we're seeing expansion of school choice in the legislature, with this year likely an significant expansion of the Opportunity Scholarship. So there'll be more and more families who are demanding to go into a private school, so increasing the supply will be a big part of filling that need.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a massive expansion in the number of charter schools, and these parents are going to need help informing the schools, and it can be a daunting task, but if somebody like us with experience can come in and say, here's how you do it, and here's avenues for funding. Why, if you're a rural school, maybe you can go to the USDA and actually get funding for the school. And if not, we've got investment banks that'll sell tax-free bonds. We can help you with the incorporation process. We can help you with fundraising. We've got grant writers. The same people that we're going to and asking for funding, we're also going and asking on behalf of grassroots groups, schools, and other organizations. Because the money doesn't have to come to us to help people. It can go straight to the people in need. We're identifying and engaging with the grassroots groups all across the country, understanding their needs, and then matching them up with organizations like the Locke Foundation or the Leadership Institute, helping them with training, resources, other things that they need. So leveraging the Liberty kind of community of organizations, and then wherever there's a gap, we're coming in and trying to help them.
Great. Well, Doug Turpin, thank you for joining us today on Issues and Insiders and sharing your story and your new endeavors. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.